Hello and welcome to Data Centre Review Live 2026. This event is all about hearing from some of the industry's leading voices on the big issues shaping the UK data centre sector. Alongside the main stage sessions, we're also catching up one-to-one with key industry voices. I'm joined by Barry Jarvis from Riello to get his perspective on where the industry's heading, what needs to change, and how data centres can scale quickly while delivering responsibly. Barry, thank you for joining us.
Nice to be here, thanks.
The UK data centre sector is under pressure to scale quickly, but also responsibly. From your point of view, what's the single biggest challenge facing the industry right now?
At the moment, I mean, we're a UPS company, so at the moment, power is probably one of the biggest things. Obviously, access to power. Once you've got the permission, the connection, things like transformers, and then right through to UPS availability, generator availability. Your on-site backup power as well is a big thing. We're building so many data centers at the moment that manufacturers are not struggling, but having to really plan lead times and manufacturing capacity. So that's a definite consideration. If you're in the planning phases going into procurement at the moment for your data center, then I would really be focusing in on those lead times, making sure that everything is going to be hitting on those lead times that you need to make your next milestone. But aside from equipment, actually one of the big challenges once you've got through that stage, that build stage, is resource, people power. Commissioning engineers, experienced commissioning engineers is a big one. There's a lot of labor involved in commissioning a data center at the moment. Again, making sure that you've got that availability later down the line. You don't want to be stood there with a data center fully built but not operational because you can't allocate resource. So that's a big one for the industry at the moment as well, getting good, experienced people in.
One of the biggest challenges, and that's something that was discussed during a session on the main stage earlier, was public trust. The industry seems to be struggling with communication and has been vilified by some sectors of society. So what does it need to do to build better public trust and explain its value to the UK economy?
This is something that's been kind of talked about. Well, it has been talked about for a few years now. There's been a number of voices, prominent voices. Emma Fryer from Cirrus One stands out. I know Gary Connolly from Digital Infrastructure Ireland, he speaks a lot about this. We as an industry, we focus a lot on the product, the building. And it seems to be, get that built, get it online. And only recently, relatively recently, has there been enough or a growing concern for actually what it means to the average Joe public. Obviously, there's schemes now where we're seeing a little bit more involvement in kind of district heating, things like this. But I think actually until we can get to a point where you can walk down the street and somebody holding their iPhone can say that is operating because of a data center. And not because of iCloud or because of Google, Docs and all this kind of stuff that they're using. They know they're using it, but they don't necessarily make the link between the device and a data center. And I think unless we can get to that point where that normal, everyday person walking down the road can do that, then there's still work to do. There should be, in my opinion, a big push, particularly with the amount of data centers now going in relatively close proximity to general population, housing areas and what have you. There should be a real big push on getting in early, not just rocking up with the planners and then going, yep, we're putting a data center here. Why not get into local schools, colleges, really early, put on events. Why not bring public in and just give them a tour of your data center? In fact, I saw on LinkedIn, I can't remember who it was, it might have been KO Data, recently posted that they'd had a concerned member of the public about one of their data centers. It was mostly around water usage. And you could see that they'd picked up a lot of information that wasn't correct, a hearsay about what the negative impact of a data center would be. And actually the response was, that's all incorrect. Why don't you come and see our data center and see what it is, how it's built, have a look around, and we can talk you through it. That is the perfect response, in my opinion. Get people really engaged.
Of course, future demand won't just come from new build sites. A lot of those are the ones that are the most controversial perhaps, but a lot will depend on upgrades, retrofits and operational improvements. So what should operators prioritise when they're modernising existing infrastructure?
Yeah, we've been, like many, we've been putting equipment into data centre for many, many years now, and we're seeing a lot of these sites that previously are, weirdly have gone undetected. Obviously, they didn't have the public scrutiny that they did then, but they've kind of come and they were built to a spec. They were built to a spec that was of the day, of its time. Now what we're seeing is we've got this building, we have this equipment, we need to get X amount of power out of it, and that might be double what it was. So how can we do this? Well, equipment's moved on, products moved on, particularly UPS's footprint has reduced. We've got, VRLA batteries versus lithium now, for example. Again, reduction in footprint, things like this. And so with the retrofit, you are looking at how much space I can save by, with new equipment, how much more efficient that new equipment is. But then also, you're also working to a budget. You don't necessarily have the same budget as a new build. And so sometimes the question might need to be asked of, well, do I have to upgrade everything? Can I get away with, not get away with, but can I reuse certain elements? Your cooling system might be fine. And because of the efficiency improvements in a UPS and other equipment that is in that data center, actually you might find that they're not putting out as much heat. So that might be an avenue that you can, a potential developer can explore. Ultimately, though, with a retrofit, I think for me, depending when it was built, most people should be seeing quite a drastic saving in footprint, a drastic saving on operational costs through efficiency gains. And of course, for a data center, in theory, that gives them more white space to sell. And that's the aim of the game.
What part do you think UPS will play in data centers over the next year?
So I think efficiency is probably one of the biggest gains that we've seen in UPS recently. Our latest model is kind of leaps and bounds above what we were able to do only a few years ago, and that in itself is something that can be further explored. We're probably talking marginal gains, but from a UPS point of view, every ounce of extra power that we can get on the output of the UPS that isn't wasted is a benefit to the data center. Bigger in terms of capacity, not necessarily in terms of footprint. Shrinking the footprint and bigger capacity is the ultimate aim, because that's what people are looking for: higher power but not as much space. The problem with that, of course, is sometimes you do hit the limits of technology, and so that's what the clever chaps in R&D are doing all the time. Trying to figure out those ways that we can increase the overall capacity of our UPSs, particularly with the modularity of UPSs now, kind of that pay-as-you-grow approach that we're seeing in data centers, where we can might put in a 1.2 meg system that can grow to 1.8, parallel up to 6 megawatts. It depends as well on how we see the development and the design of data centers going. We're seeing already much bigger deployments than we used to. A relatively small deployment in one block now is 8 megawatt. And so for almost every UPS manufacturer at the moment, that's still multiple UPSs. I think if we can get a single UPS that is higher, like I say, higher in output power, that we can parallel up continuously, like we do now, that means less footprint, less overall requirement of multiple UPSs. If we're looking at 2 4 megawatt UPSs, now I'm not saying that's achievable at the moment, but in a few years' time, we should be at a point where we can really ramp up that power of a single UPS that we can then parallel up and aid the deployment of data centers a lot quicker.
Looking ahead to the next generation of data centers, what do you think is going to separate the leaders from everyone else over the next 3 to 5 years?
That is a tough question. So I think from a design and build point of view, I think standardization to an extent is key. You know, and we are seeing this already, but if you can standardize, a lot of companies are going to what's called a pod design. If you can make a standardized design that you can just rinse and repeat, that makes it easier for not only the builder to actually deploy that, but for the supply chain, because the supply chain then knows, well, I've got that UPS, or I've got that cooler, and I've got, you know, these batteries and whatever else that is required for that pod, just boom, 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 like Lego blocks, rinse and repeat. And so that is key at the moment. That will aid quick deployment, as long as manufacturing capacity is available. Power connections are available, and lead times are there. So the challenges, people setting up their supply chain so that they're not relying on just one or two key manufacturers would probably be beneficial as well. Whilst it's great from an ongoing operational point of view, you've got one point of contact. From a supply chain point of view, it's risky. You know, it's risky. If you're, again, coming from a UPS point of view, if your UPS manufacturer suddenly ramps down their production, or they come up with they land a big job from somebody else that then affects your production schedule, it leaves you in a bit of a pickle.
Thank you so much for sharing your perspective, Barry. That's been really interesting. For more conversations and insight from Data Center Review Live 2026, head to the DCR website, subscribe to our YouTube channel, or follow us across our social channels. But for now, thanks for watching.